And we are recording. Episode number 4 of the All Surface Show is here today. I am David E.J. Berger. With me, as always, is Steve, Mr. Ace Previews himself. We are known in our small circles for the betting streets, and this is our more general tennis conversation that we're having on a weekly basis now. A whole month of shows, Steve. We're doing it. I mean, the train is not stopping. Welcome in.
The train has left the station and we are full steam ahead. Thank you very much for that welcome. Glad to be here for episode number 4. Should be good little bit to talk about from the last week of action. Should we get stuck straight into it?
Yes, let's do it. In fact, we are going to continue talking about a tournament we set up last week, which is the WTA Beijing, the 1,000 event still going on for the women, and we are into the quarterfinals, and there has been upsets galore. Some you have profited from, Steve. On your Discord, you have tipped some hefty outright wins at big dog prices. We love to see it. Let's start with the Navarro Swiatek match. Emma Navarro, the American, who has not had a great season so far. I think her 2024 was a bit of a breakthrough, and I don't want to say she's taken a step back necessarily in 2025, but I think that people maybe expected more from her this year to build upon that 2024 into 2025, and I don't think she's taken the leap that was expected. However, this was a nice feather in the cap, this match, bageling your Wimbledon champion in conditions that does seem like Iga's opposable, and she came through in the end. Navarro, what did you think about that match and the upsets in general here in Beijing, Steve?
Yeah, there's certainly been a couple of really interesting upsets, but yeah, I'll start by talking with Emma Navarro, and Iga is at a really interesting point. I think if you look at her last 12 months in particular, you can really split her results up into basically everyone who's ranked 21 and below. She's been fairly dominant against, and a very, very large portion of those she's been winning in straight sets. That's where you see the bagels. That's where you see a 6-love and a 6-1 here and there across the course of what are some pretty dominant beatdowns, which then puts her in good position come later in the tournament because she hasn't spent a whole lot of time on court. When you bring it towards the top 20 players, it doesn't quite look as dominant then. There's not as many straight set wins. There's a lot more 3-set wins and losses overall. And when you look back over the hard court season, it probably hasn't been the most dominant for her. Lost to Towson, I think it was in Canada. Lost to Anna Samova at the US Open, and then has lost to Navarro here. What I did love about Navarro and her performance in particular was, she wasn't going to, you see a lot of players who will play against Iga and they'll try and play their consistent, same game that they play against every opponent. They'll stay behind the baseline. They'll keep getting the ball back. Navarro was playing some really, really aggressive tennis, particularly first strike on the on Iga's second serve was, taking the ball really early, right inside the baseline. And yes, Iga did generate a lot of unforced errors, but I think also, that what we've seen with Iga is that the second serve, there's no real plan B at times. It's kind of, I'm hoping that the plan A is going to, help me course correct here at some point across the course of the match. So great win by Navarro, particularly the 6-love in the third set. So really interested to see how she goes tonight as well against Jessica Pegula in what should be an interesting quarterfinal. But yeah, there's been upsets, all the way through. I think it's probably this time of year, you're probably getting a little bit more variety in terms of level. You've got some players who are really tired from, the 9 months that have come before it in the season. And you've got some players who maybe had injuries along the way or didn't play a lot of top level tennis who are now coming in with a little bit of a burst of energy. As an Australian, I'm probably always going to mention Priscilla Hon here. I think she's been brilliant in the back end of 2025. It was a set and a breakup on Belinda Bencic, so it wasn't too far off a fourth round appearance here after some strong showings at the US Open. But yeah, there's been some upsets. We might talk about one of the other big upsets as one of your matches of the week a little later on. But yeah, it's been the tournament's felt like it's gone for closer to a month than it has a week, but it's been it's been a fun tournament, I think, as a WTA watcher.
Yeah, you mentioned the upset I'm going to be talking about. It's my match of the week I saw. But before we get there, I have the round of 16 up. We talked about Andreev when previewing this tournament. She falls to Cartel, who's taking on Noskova next. Andreev, I feel another player that really hasn't built upon some of the early season success. I mentioned the 2024 stuff with Navarro. Andreev, she's your Indian Wells champion. And that's been about it, really. Right, Steve?
Yeah, it was a strong. Mira had a really strong start to the year, and she was obviously known as being one of those top players. But then, I think beat Iga a couple of times. In the first couple of months of the season, as you said, big tournament win. It was able to kind of, everyone then took notice. But yeah, it's been that ability to kind of translate that to full season success and kind of managing expectation. I think what we're ultimately going to see with Mira is we're going to fast forward to 2029, and she's probably going to have a couple of Grand Slams under her belt. She's still going to be sitting in that top handful of players. I mean, you sit there and go, "Oh wow, she's only 23." Like it's one of those ones of it takes a little bit of time, I think, at the top level to be able to kind of grab that consistency week to week. And across the course of the season, I feel like she's one to watch, particularly in January after players have had an extended break and time off. I'm really interested to see what 2026 brings for the Russian. But yeah, it was a disappointing loss. Did a lot of really good work to get things back on track after dropping the first set against Kartal, but just couldn't find a way to edge in front in the third set, serving from behind, and it came back to bite right at the very end.
The other big upset, I have it on the round of 16, but it was in the round of 32. And one of the stories of the week is the German Eva Lees. What a week for her. She takes out Elena Rybakina. That was my match of the week, the best match I saw this week. I'll lead with that here since we are talking WTA Beijing. I felt like there was a real chance after she drops that second set, 1-6, that she could just roll over and the match could be done and dusted pretty quickly in the third. But she comes through, incredible resilience in the third set, hanging in there. And I want to say too about Rybakina, I feel like she has moments where she really is just a self-sabotager. And not to take away from what Lise did in that match, especially that third set, but a lot of Rybakina's failings, even thinking back to losing to Mbuko in Canada, a lot of her lack of success or failures is self-inflicted. But want to talk about Lise and give her some shine. And obviously she's one of the main characters of this week. And I think that's one of the great things about tennis, Steve, and why I like tennis and I find it so rewarding is not just the beauty of the sport itself, but, every week we get new characters, there's new storylines, and there's opportunities for people to make names for themselves. Lise is a bubbly personality. She seems like a fun player on tour. She has a lot of friends, and it's nice to see her have a great week and break through a bit. As one of the things I find rewarding about tennis is just seeing players succeed after struggling a bit, or seeing the breakthroughs and knowing the backstory and what it took to get there. And I think we have that here with Lise.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two chapters, I guess, to the breakthrough of sorts for Eva this year. So the first one was the Australian Open, where she lost in the final round of qualifying. Was granted a lucky loser position. I think it was like 15 minutes before match start. Stepped on court, won, and then ended up in a fourth round of the Australian Open. And that kind of, I think, gave her a little bit of a boost. It was offset a little bit by playing Iga in round 4 and only winning one game. And there was a kind of a bit of a big mismatch there. But what we've seen since then is a player who's then come in, solidified themselves within the top 100, edging towards the top 50 now. And what I thought here is, as you said, against Rybakina, there were moments where the match could have definitely got away from Eva. She fell down a break in the third set, and then was able to get that break straight back, and be able to kind of keep that pressure on. And even little moments, I think, Rybakina serving, I think it was at 4-5, had 30 love, and then, found herself in trouble on serve. And Lise was able to kind of force the issue, force multiple juices, force multiple match points, and was able to get the breakthrough. I think that's the thing with Rybakina that we've seen is her best is exceptional and can beat anyone on tour, but there is going to be some fluctuation in that level, tournament to tournament, but also, match to match and set to set. So that's the case there. So, Eva has had her struggles, physically at times has had to retire, has some kind of longer term injuries that she does need to manage, but it's been a really impressive 2025 season for her as she moves her way towards the top 50.
And overcoming better players too. You look at the last two tournaments she was in. Noskova, obviously someone that's tough to beat. She retired in that match, but the Czech is a tough opponent. Loses to Towson, who's having a great season at the next event in Korea. And then obviously she withdrew ahead of the US Open in Cleveland. And then in Cincinnati, she's playing Madison Keys. So a big part of the breakthrough was actually beating players that are ranked higher than her, have had more success on tour than her. So I think that's what makes what she's done this week even more impressive.
Yeah, and I don't think she lost any admirers playing Coco yesterday. I think it was 6-4, 6-3, 6-4 in the end. Topsy-turvy, dug in, hung around, asked questions of Coco. I think broke her at least 3 times across the course of the match, and was in a handful of other, long service games from Coco. So big tournament for her, and fingers crossed for her, she can turn that into a solid finish to the year. Because as always, the tour with that 12-month ranking cycle, she's going to have 4th round Australian Open ranking points to defend. So that's going to be a big step, I think, for her moving forward.
Navarro taking on Pegula tonight. Pegula, by the way, did you see that comment she made on social media where she laughed at the idea that she'd still be playing tennis at 35? Which I think is a cool sentiment, kind of knowing that you have the end in mind. I feel like a lot of athletes don't consider that, or they're just going to play till the wheels fall off. Stan Wawrinka, but but I thought that to be interesting. Like, yeah, she kind of knows that she's not necessarily on the back nine, but the end is in the horizon for Pegula, who I believe is 30 right now. So within the next 5 years, she's calling it quits.
Yeah, I think that's fairly. I think probably for her, she's still seeing that she's got a lot of time in what should be her, some of her prime tennis years to be able to, make a dent and win some big tournaments. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she goes, or how she feels or is playing as that self-imposed deadline edges closer.
31 years old, Pegula. Another player we talked about and was curious what we would see, Amanda Anisimova. She's not going away, Steve, into the quarterfinals. Taking on Coco now. She's seemingly here, Steve, not going away.
Yep, and it's great. And I think that's been the thing, for Amanda is we've seen the performances, we've seen the making the last four of some bigger tournaments over the course of the years, and now we're seeing that more consistently, and that's great. And I think that's shown, now with her ranking the way it is, that she's well up the rankings and isn't going to be in a position where she needs to find her way through top seeds in the first or second rounds of tournaments as this unseeded floater. She's one of the big names now. It was a great win against Paolini yesterday. Lost the first set in the tie break, but to her credit, responded really strongly, 6-3, 6-4, through sets 2 and 3. And I thought also it was a really impressive performance from Paolini in terms of kind of keeping it close and not letting things really blow out, and asking a lot of questions of Amanda as well. So really, really interesting clash, and probably one that would be right up there in my match of the week.
Into the semifinals now, Anisimova. Coco Gauff, is this her tournament to lose? By the way, she's doing this with the double fault problem not completely gone. She's had matches with 8, matches with 9, only 4 against Lees, but it's still lingering around the double fault issue.
Yeah, this match, between Amanda and Coco has kind of the feelings and makings of the final before the final. It really, when you look at the rest of the crew in the top half, whoever wins this semi between the two Americans is probably going to be a pretty strong favorite, I'd imagine, in the final. It'll be interesting to see, I think, if we can get maybe an All-American final, would certainly make for an interesting clash there. But there's some great stories, between Qatar and Noshkova. And as you said, Navarro coming back into form after what's been a pretty tough year for her. So a lot of opportunities there, but I'd say, Coco, Amanda, you can almost flip a coin the way those two are playing at the moment. And whoever wins that is going to be in pole position come the final.
All right, let's pivot to the men's tour now, Steve. Let's go to Shanghai. That's my background, the lovely skyline.
Looks hot.
It is hot. I would say the big headline so far is all the retirements. I think that's a product of the end of the season and the heat. Last year was not this hot, but it has been sweltering. And I was a little concerned about Terrence Attman and his statement afterwards about how he couldn't breathe. That was interesting. Wu Yibing, who's never been the most fit, he retires. That's just a lot. And then a lot of retirements over the weekend as well at the end of Beijing and Tokyo before we even got to the heat and humidity here in Shanghai. So the end of the season is rattling its ugly head in the retirement department.
Yeah, and I think as you just touched on there when you're talking about the weather, it's one thing, I think, for the players for it to be hot, and it's another thing then to add the humidity into it. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is that the conditions are brutal, and they're not getting any less brutal in the days ahead. So really something, I think, to keep an eye on when you're looking at players, and matches that sometimes being able to last. You think about those players who can play some longer 5-set matches, in hot conditions. I'm thinking about, sometimes at Flushing Meadows, sometimes at the Australian Open. it's going to go a long way, I think, to helping here, because these conditions are brutal. I'd be saying, if I was a player out there, I'd be wanting to win the first set, because it's going to feel like a long way back winning the second set just to get to level pegging in this kind of heat. It's it is brutal. So full credit to the players for going out there and giving it a crack in the conditions. Obviously, a lot on the line, a lot of ranking points. We talked about this over the last couple of episodes. Massive opportunities for a lot of players, this time of year, to be able to make a solid dent in points they're either defending or trying to earn to get themselves inside the the top 50 or top 100 for some qualifiers. So yeah, a stack of opportunities, but it may have a bit of a survival of the fittest type feel to it at times. So beware.
The heat isn't going away either. Going to be 95 on Tuesday coming up. So it's not supposed to get under 90 degrees until a week from today in Shanghai. And to that end, your top seed, Yannick Sinner, has had not one, but two incidents in recent times where he had issues dealing with the heat. In Cincinnati, the final, he retired immediately in the first set almost against Alcaraz. The opening set against Denis Shapovalov at the U.S. Open was right in the sun. He struggled there, dropped that set. That first set. And look, not only do you have the Australian Open 1 week closer, the ATP Finals, which on our other show, the MP9 show, John pointed out under the radar, or not under the radar, but under talked about, is how much points and money you actually get at the ATP Finals as well. And not that Yannick Sinner is hurting for money, but I do think there's enough on the line for the Tour Finals to be a priority for both Alcaraz and Sinner. And I just wonder if we are going to have brutal conditions, and we know what's on the line for the Tour Finals, for the Australian Open, which is now, tickets are on sale, right?
They're on sale and they are expensive. We can talk about that in a later episode.
I question Yannick Sinner. I don't question Yannick Sinner if he's fine, whether or not he's going to win this tournament, because obviously if he is fine, he's going to. But it's going to be hot. He's already won Beijing. There's nothing really that behooves him to go all out this week when it comes to the bigger fish to fry down the line, which are the Tour Finals and the Grand Slam that's getting closer every day. I mean, you feel like it's next year, but next year is also like only, I don't know, like what, less than 2 months away at this point. So,
well, that's the thing. So we've got, there's about, we've just started October. So you've got, less than 3 months until we're going to be talking ATP or, United Cup, early tournaments for the Australian season. And I think, as I said, with those top players and the ATP finals, it's that extension out. I mean, you wouldn't imagine any of these players would be playing exhibitions or extra tournaments, would you, in the next period of time, if they're trying to save themselves for these other big tournaments where they can earn ranking points and more money? So hopefully those who are playing those exhibitions don't make too much of a comment about the conditions or fatigue. But yeah, it's a legitimate thing. Just talking about, you said Yannick Sinner's had some trouble at times with the weather. I'd say you could make a case that Novak Djokovic has had some trouble with some of the conditions, at times in recent years. Maybe that is exacerbated a little bit here by not playing as much tennis and not spending as much time on court, and being as match fit as he has been in previous years. Interesting match with Marin Cilic there, first up. But yeah, I as a tennis lover, I look at these kind of matchups and situations, and I think it's a really great opportunity that we might have someone, break through and make a decent run, at a 1,000. And as you said, Tour Finals, lots of players an opportunity for those kind of ranked 9 through 14, 15 at the moment to continue to make their push, both here and then moving back to kind of the European indoors.
Yeah, I'm curious what we're gonna get from Novak this week. I honestly feel like if he's there, or he's only there to give an honest effort, as you like to say. So I think we see some good play from Novak, not just going out there and phoning it in. I know he commented about not feeling 100% when he came back for, is it Doha or Dubai? The one he lost to Berrettini, he has admitted he came back for sponsorship. I don't think he's doing this for sponsorship. I mean, I could be wrong. He'll come back later and say he is, but he had previously said that slams were all that really mattered in terms of his appearance. Now he's already gone back on that, so we'll see. Maybe this is a sponsorship thing, but
I think, yeah, slams do matter for him, but for him to perform well at slams, he still needs to be seated pretty high to be able to avoid. He doesn't want to be rolling into Carlos Alcaraz in a 4th round at the moment, or earlier.
It's a good point.
Like he's sitting there at the moment. He's not playing a lot of tennis, and he's still, in the ATP singles race at the moment. I think he's equal 3rd with Alexander Zverev. So if he can kind of roll through, play a limited schedule across the course of a 12-month season and still be seeded 3rd or 4th at a Grand Slam, I think that's going to go a long way for him. Avoiding Sinner and Alcaraz until semifinals, and I'm sure he could live off Grand Slam semifinal ranking points and prize money for a little bit of time to keep kind of ticking up the bank account into the final months and years of the tennis career.
I don't think the bank account's hurting too bad.
I don't think that's in trouble, but it's I think the ranking points, and obviously, you find that balance a bit, that obviously he enjoys playing and he enjoys still trying to kind of challenge himself, and he's still making semifinals of Grand Slams. So why wouldn't you keep persisting? The wheels haven't fallen off for him like they have for some others who are still, kind of holding on, hoping for another run or two at ATP level.
Ben Shelton is back on the tour this week after his shoulder injury at the U.S. Open that forced him to retire, which was a bummer. We didn't get the Alcaraz-Shelton matchup we all wanted, had penciled in. He's taking on David Goffin. Shelton says he's, it sounds like he's not 100%, but he says he's well enough to play. He skipped a few tournaments to make sure that when he comes back, he's okay. Now he's back, and he talks about wanting to have some good results and try to put himself in position for Turin. So I think we should see a good Ben Shelton this week, unless the shoulder flares up. It would be interesting to see a Novak Djokovic Ben Shelton quarterfinal. I hope we get that, because I would like to see this version of Djokovic versus this version of Shelton, non-slam 3-set format. That could be popcorn, Steve.
Yeah, and hopefully his shoulder is okay. It's one of those ones you just don't want. You don't want to see players risk it and come back too early with shoulders. They're things that can get away from you a little bit. I think, there's probably a great example of another player who, has shown bursts and has really struggled with shoulder issues over the time is Thanasi Kokkinakis, who had to have another shoulder surgery, is trying to get back, I think, for January for the Australian part of the season, but they can become recurring issues. And as a player with Shelton, with his serve and his forehand, he'd want to make sure that he gets it right and gets it, that he doesn't come back too early. In another case is probably Jack Draper coming back with his elbow. Anything with your dominant arm, you want to make sure you get on top of it, because if you play with it, with a niggling issue that can hang around for a very, very long time and cause more problems. So hopefully we see him in a in solid shape on court. He's not going to have to worry. He's not going to be cold when he goes out there. At least that's one positive for him with the weather the way it is. But yeah, it'll be that's certainly going to be a match I'll be watching today.
Absolutely. All right, Steve. Well, unfortunately, we have to have a shorter version of the show this week. I am on the road tonight. Have to finish up some work, pack, get it all in. Although my flight was delayed, so I'm hoping it's not all the way canceled. I have to be somewhere tomorrow, so we shall see. And I'm gaining 3 hours in the flight, so should be interesting. Any last thoughts on Beijing for the women or Shanghai for the men?
I think for Shanghai, it's pop your sunscreen on and make sure you've got your fluids ready to go for a long match. I think it's one of the more, for me as a tennis lover, it's one of the more exciting parts of the calendar year. I think we touched on it a bit last week as well. You've got opportunities for a lot of players, to make the most of this portion of the tennis season and boost their ranking and boost their ability to springboard into 2026. So hopefully next episode we have a few more surprising names, a few Eva Lisas and the men's side to be able to make a push through here and really surprise. But otherwise, safe travels to you.
Thank you so much. And yes, exciting to talk new names. We got an Eva Lise segment out, and we'll see who we talk about next time on episode 5. Thank you, everyone, for watching.